watching The Producer's Room, a streaming web series featuring the creators behind the hit songs of today's music industry. Songwriters, music producers, and artists discuss their creative process as well as examining current issues and technologies in today's rapidly changing music business. Your host is producer, songwriter, and educator Dave Tuff. Welcome to The Producer's Room.
Welcome to this episode of The Producer's Room. Once again, we're on location today. We're a show that focuses on the creative process behind the hits of today and yesterday. Our guest today, I'm really excited about, one of my favorite producers of all time, really. Producers, keyboardists, artist, Michael Omartian. And I encourage you guys, there's so much intro, I encourage you guys to just really go check him out online. But let me tell you a little bit about Michael. Michael has contributed his talents to over 350 million recorded albums and CDs sold worldwide. That's important, sold, not made. And he has won 3 Grammys, been nominated for 17 Grammys, if you can believe that. And one of the Grammys he won was really impressive to me, because there's probably only 50 guys, if you think 50 years of Grammys, Producer of the Year in 1984, Christopher Cross's album, self-titled album of that year. Michael has also worked with such artists as Sheena Easton, Richard Marx, Stephen Bishop, Roberta Flack, Reba. It just goes on and on and on. I could sit here and read forever. But anyway, love to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much, Michael. And we're coming to you from your home studio here. And do you have a name for your
the
facility?
Sound House?
Oh, cool. That's appropriate, yes. Right?
And my engineer's wife, Suzanne, she came up with the name.
That's good. And so how long have you actually been in this facility here?
Well, for this house, we built this in the house, and we've been here for about 11 years.
Wow.
But I came to Nashville in '93, so we've been here a long time.
Wow. And we're here in the tracking room right now. We got your piano there. What kind of brand is that?
It's a Yamaha C7.
Great.
Yeah.
And we'll take you guys into the control room here in just a little while, and we're actually going to break down. I'm really excited to break down the production of yours and talk about it. Let's start. I don't want to cover too much history, but there's so much great history there that I feel like we should at least address some of it, and then we'll move on to what you're doing nowadays, because I want to hear about that too. Okay. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up, how you made your way to LA, how you made your way into the session scene there. Let's do a little bit of background.
Well, it was a different time. I mean, if you were to go to university to study music, you would certainly not be studying anything that had to do with recording.
Right.
It would be the fine arts, Broadway musicals, whatever, classical. And so as a kid, my mom noticed that at about 2 or 3 years old, I was just taking sticks or whatever I could find, wooden spoons, and I was knocking out beats, and she couldn't figure out what was going on. And my aunt had a upright piano at her house. And we used to live in a neighborhood where there were a lot of aunts and uncles, and everybody was,
That's
Chicago,
great. You had all your
Chicago.
family there. Yeah,
basically. And so I'd walk to my aunt's house, and I would sit at the piano. I'd be plunking out stuff. And they said by about 4 years old, they said I was making sense just by ear.
Wow.
So my aunt told my mom, she really encouraged me to get some piano lessons. At the same time, accordion lessons. So it was like all, and then percussion lessons too. So I was taking accordion, piano, and drums at the same time. But I remember my piano teacher would just smack my hand with a ruler because I would improvise. And she says, "There's no improvising here. Read the notes." Well, anyway, that was where I felt like I functioned the best. It wasn't reading somebody else's music. Right. It was more like making up my own stuff.
Yeah.
And so that kind of led, back in those days, jazz, Oscar Peterson, Art Tatum, all these different people. These are the kind of people that I was attracted to. And so through my grade school and through high school, I was listening to a lot of these players. And I really wasn't interested in pop music at all, because I hate to say this, I mean, I wasn't the biggest Elvis Presley fan. I was more into progressive music.
Sure.
But then the British invasion came along. And I happened to be right about 18 years old when the Beatles hit. And that kind of caught my ear, because it was a combination of great songwriting and the way it was recorded. And what happened, coinciding with that, I was paying attention to the albums that I would buy. I'd go out and buy a Beatles album or Dave Clark 5 album or Rolling Stones album or whatever, the Beach Boys. And I would look at the album covers and I'd go, nothing's recorded in Chicago.
Right.
It's either Los Angeles.
Had Bill Putnam moved?
Yeah.
Do you know he's moved to LA at that point? Yeah. So he wasn't in Chicago anymore.
Yeah. So, and that was mostly just jingles.
Right.
The whole jingle business.
Yeah.
You know. So I was reading credits, Hal Blaine, Joe Osborne, all these cats, and I'd read these albums. I go, you know what? If I want to do, and I was really attracted to playing.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? I can't do anything in Chicago. I played some clubs on Wells Street, Rush Street, but it wasn't
just cover bands and
that kind of stuff.
Jazz
Yeah. So I said, I realized that I'd be the very first person in my family to actually get on a plane and go somewhere else. Everybody stayed in neighborhoods.
Right.
And so, to my mother's absolute consternation and complete panic, I decided I was going to go to L.A. Now, I didn't know anybody in L.A.
Wow.
I didn't even know what was waiting in L.A. I mean, it was really a leap of faith.
Yeah.
I just said, you know what? I have $3,000 to my name that I've been saving through jobs and stuff like that, and I just got on a plane and got to L.A. and got off the plane without any plan. And I made my way to North Hollywood, found a little apartment, bought a car. And so, I mean, it was just a matter of actually there was no path to what I was going to do in any kind of an educational sense other than go say, I'll do anything for nothing, do whatever you want me to do.
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, I hate to say it, but I think that's as true today as it was then, even though there's so many other paths of getting to that point. It still comes down to, are you willing to do the hard work and spend the time? And so I spent about 4 or 5 years just kind of kicking around, and there's a group called Loggins of Messina back in the day.
Yes.
I met Kenny Loggins back in 71 and Jimmy Messina in 71. They were auditioning players for this new band called Loggins of Messina. And I got to know Kenny and I got to know Jimmy, and I was their keyboard player. Do you want me to stop here? Do you want me to just keep
No, I'm digging it. But when I was reading your bio too, it said something about you also writing some songs as well. So was your initial goal when you moved to Los Angeles to become a side keyboard guy, or was it to write songs?
Let me put it this way.
Yeah.
I admired the idea of being on a record, doing something on a record.
Gotcha.
But I was told that a good path is to become a songwriter. Well, I've never felt I've fully developed as a songwriter.
Right.
I've developed in other ways because of my interest seemed to be that. So songwriting was facilitating the ability to meet artists.
Gotcha.
And actually my first big break in the studio there was a guy named Jerry McLean and his wife Suzanne McLean, and they had a deal with CBS at the time. And their producer was the guy who did the vocals arrangements for The Fifth Dimension, Bob Alcivar.
Nice.
But anyway, I wrote a song with Jerry and Suzanne, and they insisted to the producer that I had to be on the session. Now, wait a minute. Hal Blaine, Joe Osborne, all these, and he said, I'm not taking a chance on somebody that I don't know.
Right.
And Jerry, unbeknownst to me, said, this is a deal breaker. I didn't know that he went that far, and convinced the guy.
Good for him.
And so I remember I was on this session, and there was Hal Blaine sitting there, Joe Osborne, all the people that I read on the credits, and I'm sitting there, and my knees are just, I'm just rattling, because I don't know what's about to happen. Well, anyway, I played 3 songs, none of which I remember, even the song that I wrote with them. I don't remember anything. I was in a fog. But before the end of the session, Joe and Hal both came up and said, give me your phone number.
Wow.
And Joe Osborne said, go today and join the union.
Yeah.
And call this number and get a musical service, a booking service. I said, okay.
It's a pretty nice compliment.
So the minute I got done with the
studio.
session, I went straight to the Musicians Union. It was very close to the studio we were working at. It's at CBS Studios, and right down the street was the Musicians Union. And I called the number and the next week I had 7 sessions booked.
Ooh, wow.
The next week.
So were you, and that kind of thing, you know, we're so used to Nashville to reading number charts, number system, but that was chords.
Oh, yeah. And notes.
And notes. Okay, so it was, but there was some improvisation in there. Okay,
a lot.
So, some freedom.
I mean, you had Motown. When I play on Motown sessions, they literally wrote out the drum parts, the bass parts, and the keyboard parts, and they wanted you to stick pretty much with it. But part of that, all in that is that don't forget to learn how to read.
Right,
you know, it really opens the door to so many things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice to know that you can just play off this, but you get places if you're able to read music that you would not get if you didn't.
Right.
So.
And that kind of leads me to another rabbit hole, and we'll come back.
Sure.
But what do you think it was about your playing, looking back on it, that attracted them to you? That you were an ensemble player, that you knew how to play in the holes, that you knew.
Well, I didn't realize it, but it came later. Was the fact that I was probably one of the first guys that would pick apart and know that the second chorus I would play the same as I play. There was an order.
Right.
To what I was doing. And I would watch some of the, especially guitar players, that would noodle, but they would noodle kind of in an improvising, whatever it is.
Improvising
a noodle. Yeah. And the same thing wouldn't show up where you'd want the hook to be. And it would usually be someone in the booth said, please play that again in the second chorus or stuff, where they never had to tell me that.
Yeah.
It was just kind of...
So it was like you were pre-Pro Tools. You were editing yourself.
Yeah, I was kind of becoming a producer
right.
and an arranger in a funny back way with this thing. And I think that part of it was a combination. Terry, my engineer, who will be later in the segment, Terry says I'm one of the I play really hard, which digs the sound out of the piano. And I think that was another thing. People said, man, when you play, the piano sounds great. I said, because I play so dang hard. And I would knock pianos out of tune very quickly. But anyway, so
coming back, let's go back to Loggins and Messina. So you were with them and you were auditioning. So you were auditioning for road gigs at the same time as you were in the studio?
Well, I didn't know about this opportunity that was going to come up as a studio player. That's what I wanted to do, but I had nothing to do, so I would rehearse 9 or 10 songs with them for a year.
Right.
I mean, a year we'd be doing that first album, rehearsing, and I'm going, this is driving me nuts.
So going back then to Loggins and Messina, were you looking for road gigs at that time? Were you auditioning for both studio stuff and road stuff?
Well, it was an opportunity that presented itself at the time, so I hadn't really mapped out what was going to happen afterwards. And so we would rehearse. We rehearsed these 9 or 10 songs for the first album for about a year, and I was going absolutely nuts because that was just so counter to what I wanted to do.
Right.
But I appreciated the opportunity, and they were very talented people.
Yeah.
But this break that I got in the session thing happened towards the end of that year.
Right.
And so they were pretty disappointed when I said I'm not going on the road.
Yeah.
And the reason is because what I really want to do is just presented itself. And I ended up, they would hire me for the subsequent albums to play. Cool. So I'm not sure that there was a lot of sour grapes.
Yeah,
they understood.
It worked out.
They understood what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it would be kind of confining to go out and play 9 or 10 songs over and over again on the road. I just couldn't do that.
Was it still, I mean, because this is what I hear from the guys in Nashville, that if you're a road guy, you're gone most of the time and people kind of forget about you as a studio guy and vice versa. I mean, I don't know if it was like that
if you're
in LA.
good, that's not the way it is.
Yeah.
But, and that brings up the whole conundrum of today.
Kenny Greenberg that do both and all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So.
Cool. So, okay, so Loggins and Messina, you're done with that. You finally start to get into the studio thing. And then I guess the question becomes, how did you go from keyboard player, and you can go through some of the sessions you played on as a keyboard player, to moving into the producer, arranger role and all that? So.
Well, there was a guy named Steve Berry at ABC Dunhill. And ABC Dunhill was a very hot label back then. They had, Jim Croce, Three Dog Night, just mamas and papas. You just name them. Steely Dan, all these groups.
Yeah.
And they had an office on Beverly Boulevard, and upstairs were 3 studios. And so it was part of the facility. And so what would happen was Steve say, Omar, let's go. We're going to produce this. And we'd go upstairs and we'd pull a rhythm section together and we'd play. And so it was just, I'd play a lot of piano, but Steve said, I want you to do more than play piano. I want you to arrange. I want you to be part of the production process. So if it wasn't for him, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it really was important that Steve came into my life, because he was really he was like an advocate for me. Totally. And it was the kind of thing that I rise into, Rod Stewart, all these different people.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily translate into going beyond that.
Right.
He saw that it could go beyond that, and as a result, had me arrange sessions. I would write out the charts. That kind of went into the Steely Dan thing. Donald and Walter, I'd go over to their house, and they would play a song, and I would transcribe it, and I would add some flourish here and there, and then we'd go in the studio and do their stuff. So it was a kind of a neat family over at ABC Dunhill, and that unfortunately doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That kind of
thing.
Well,
was the position staff producer? Like you were hired as staff producer?
I was hired as a staff producer.
Crazy.
Yeah. which is,
right.
Well, and then I went to Warner Brothers, and there were 12 of us in the staff producers. Teddy Templeman, Doobie Brothers,
and then Van Halen.
Van Halen,
he was the guy that they said put the first 57. I don't know if that's true or not, but he was one of the first. Yeah,
unbelievable.
Yeah.
And you had Russ Titleman.
Yeah.
Well, Eric Clapton, he produced Eric Clapton, and Steve Winwood. You had Gary Katz, Steely Dan.
Yeah.
You had Steve Berry there, who was produced a million things himself. It was kind of a power. And I have a funny story about the fact that here's this brain trust and how stupid we really were. And we had some pretty funny stuff.
Was Warner Brothers still in Burbank at that point?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So.
I think it's still there.
Oh yeah, it's still there.
It's still there. Absolutely. Yeah. But we were doing every Wednesday we would do these A&R meetings. And Mo Austin, who was the president of Warner Brothers, he would come down and check in and say, "How's it going, guys?" And he came down, he says, "I want you to listen to this, and we're thinking about putting this out as the next Doobie Brothers single, What a Fool Believes."
No.
So we listen, and Teddy's even there. And I could see Teddy was a little bit agitated, and I'm going, "What's the matter?" Because he produced it. And he said, "I don't think that's a single." And we said, "No, we don't think that's a single." And Mo looked at us and said, "I don't really care what you think. That's the next single." And of course, it was a #1 record.
But then that goes back to your relationship with Kenny, because that was a Kenny tune, right? Yeah. Kenny and Michael.
Oh yeah.
And,
Oh yeah.
You
absolutely.
can hear that, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow, man. So that brings me to, because I just find fascinating all the stuff that, I kind of had to dig a little bit, but it's so cool that you played either piano on these or co-wrote them. Let me just name some things, and maybe if you want to comment on each of them. So you played piano on John Lennon's rock and roll album. That's the truth, huh?
Yeah. He wasn't in very good shape, though.
Well, yeah, and that was the Lost Weekend, the Lost 9 months.
He wasn't in very good shape. In fact, they booked me for an extended period of time, and I quit after. I said, "I don't want to do this anymore."
That was Phil Spector on the. We won't.
And I love John Lennon, man.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
The guy's in jail now.
But he wasn't in good shape.
And then you had mentioned the 2 Steely Dan albums, Pretzel Logic and Katie Lied, and Asia too. And the Night Fly. Then later when Donna did his solo thing. Right. We'll talk about all that, man. I mean, it's just like you're working with the cream of the industry.
Well,
all
of us,
guys and
all
writers.
of us, Jeff Becerra, all the session guys said it sure isn't fun, but it's good. Because it wasn't necessarily fun.
Right.
It was you got very little feedback from them.
Was this was going in the period where they were auditioning 10 guitar players, 10 drummers?
I remember one song. I was on 7 recordings of this one song, and I was the only constant. And then I felt like saying, well, maybe it's me.
Right.
But yeah, they would do multiple rhythm sections on a song, and you would just show up, and here was another one. We try it again, and you would sit there and go, what is the matter with what we just did? It sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
And you just didn't know. Right. You just didn't know.
Well, let me ask you about the creative process there a little bit too, because I think, and I encourage our audience to check out, I think it's the Asia documentary. It's on YouTube. I don't know if it's supposed to be on YouTube, but it really shows behind the scenes. And one thing I saw is that they would rehearse you guys to death and then take a lunch break, and then they found, this is what the documentary says, you can either confirm or deny this, after people had eaten, then they would come back, and right when they got back, they would try to get the take then. But as far as, I guess, even your production style today, have you found a particular time when you can get that best take? In Nashville, I've heard, if you do more than 3 takes with the band, it's, downhill after there.
It really depends. It really depends on what you're doing. I don't believe in taking forever.
Right.
I really don't, because especially with Pro Tools, with what we have, if there's magic and a few mistakes, there's no reason to record it again. I would say that maybe that's not true when it was harder to clean up something. Yeah. But with Steely Dan, they were kind of the epitome of kind of them, and they were the epitome of wearing you out, wearing something out. But all to say, some days when you said, man, I cannot believe how long that took, and I hated what I did at the end, but then when you heard it back the next day, you went, oh, that was the best take. Yeah. And sometimes it would be like you said, you take a lunch break, you come back, and they go, okay, we were able to forget about this for a while. Right. And then you go back and hit it. Yeah. Your Gold Teeth Part 2 took forever because it was just 6/8, 3/8, funny time signatures and stuff. And it took us recording it for one day. It was almost like rehearsing. We needed to rehearse it so that we came back the next day and it was in us, as opposed to trying to deal with this 6/8 bar followed by a 3/8, and someone's not in the same place.
Right.
And so I think that it was good. You know how it is. You rehearse something, you could go to bed, get up the next morning, there it is.
Well, the interesting thing that ties into too nowadays in Nashville, and you've been part of the Nashville scene for 20 years, is I've heard that a lot of producers today don't even do pre-production. The only guy I've heard that still does it is Paul Worley. He'll book out a rehearsal studio and rehearse the band for 2 weeks before they go into the studio. Mm-hmm. Do you do that kind of thing? Do you think it's a good idea, or do you think once you get a good group of solid guys together?
Well, what's happening is that technology has kind of come in, and a lot of times I will experiment in the MIDI domain.
Right. Yeah.
And
a little sketch
and
going.
Even with some of the guitar players like Tom Hemby, I use Tom Hemby. Tom Hemby will actually put guitar parts down on a track, bring a drive, and we will use his guitar parts as a fundamental to play around. Because a lot of times, especially with country, it's very guitar oriented.
Right.
And sometimes it's not good to have 7 or 8 musicians in the room. It just really complicates it. So you organize guitar parts.
Yeah.
There's 3 of them, but it doesn't sound like it's just a free-for-all. It's like really thought out. I do the same thing. You'll use some sort of a MIDI drum kit or some kind of a groove to kind of be in there. And so there's a lot of different ways that we do it today that we wouldn't have done it because we didn't have the technology to do it.
Wow.
So
wow.
You make use of the technology.
Yeah.
Though I still don't like the idea of doing an entire track in the MIDI realm. I mean, there was a track that we did recently where we cut it with a rhythm section and went, this is completely wrong. So we took part of it, took the drums out until one section, and I built with more of a orchestral drum thing. We broke it down because it didn't feel right with the drums and the bass kind of confined the entire track and didn't let it breathe. It breathed in its demo.
Right.
But what I thought I was going to hear, it never came to pass. Right. So you deal with it. We go, okay, we've got guitars sound great, the keyboards sound great, and there's certain sections of the drums that sound great. So what we did was we rebuilt the track using drums in certain spots. Yeah. It's more like a movie score thing.
Sure.
So everything, it's just being able to, be able to move quickly, be able to make a decision, not get caught up and go, oh no, this whole thing's blowing up. What are we going to do? No, you got to sit there and go, with the technology we have today, we can deal with it. So, and we dealt with it, and it turned out really cool.
That's a good story.
Turned out really cool.
That was a great story, and we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. See you guys in a second.
All right. The town has this energy. You never know who you're going to bump into.
We moved to Nashville, and I started singing in clubs 5 nights a week.
On any given night, you can go to the End and watch a show. You go to Tootsie's and watch a show. You can go to Exit Inn. You can go to the Ryman.
They're sick musicians and sick singers. It doesn't surprise me. It's Music City.
Hey guys, welcome back. Once again, our guest today is Michael Omartian, and we were just talking about, you were talking about how the technology today allows you to do some things you wouldn't have been able to do back in the day. But I feel like still a constant that I want you to comment on is what makes a good session player or studio player. You had talked about the ability to read, but as we all know, classical musicians can read a lot. But in the pop genres or R&B or whatever you're talking about, country nowadays, is it a unique voice that they bring to the table? Is it an ability to work quickly? Is it all of the above? Chops?
Well, it depends on what the music is, and I don't want to be critical, but pop music today has become a mantra of 3 or 4 chords strewn together.
Yeah.
The chorus can be the same chord progression.
Yeah.
It's a simplistic. I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's a simplifying of something, and I don't find it very challenging.
Right.
And so what's happening, well, I heard a statistic, and this statistic was from 2012, that in 2012, 72,000 releases happened in the calendar year of 2012. When I was with Warner Brothers in '85, because we had these conferences every year, and they would talk about how many releases, I know that the worldwide releases on all labels was 1,200.
Wow.
So what's happening is that you have a lot more people that are trying to get into the mainstream, and the trouble is that they're going, well, that Gaga record that I heard, if we just kind of emulate something here, that'll get the door open and we'll be able to go in. Well, it's really not. Right. That's really not what happens.
Right.
The thing is that I think there's there's so much talent, and I believe there's way more talent than there ever was. So I don't think it's a talent issue.
Right.
I think it's a challenge issue. I think it's a challenge issue that says, I am not going to, on purpose, try to sound like or be like. And I think that what it is that find your uniqueness.
Right, right.
Don't just go, oh, Katy Perry or so-and-so.
Sure.
We just needed to clog the market with the same. I mean, I went to the CRS recently, which is the country radio thing, and I listened to a showcase luncheon.
Yeah.
And I sat there and I went, oh my goodness, it's the chord changes are all the same.
Same thing
I mean, it's
over
just the
and
same,
over, yeah.
recycle. Now you have obviously exceptions to the rule, and they're all over the place.
Yeah.
The trouble is that you're being bombarded with YouTube, with all the different places, and you're hearing so much similarity. So what helps you stick out? Well, one of them, the ways you stick out as far as I'm concerned is if you happen to be an instrumentalist, get really good at what you do. Push it a little bit.
Right.
Get outside the envelope. Try. I mean, I go to a church where our worship thing is the 4 chords over and over again.
Right.
And I'm going, oh my gosh. I mean, it's kind of like we need to be better than that.
Yeah, just switch it
You're
up.
not a guitar player because you know 8 chords.
Right.
You're just not.
Yeah.
Or you can play a solo with just over and over. I mean, that's not a solo. There's nothing there. I mean, I hate to.
Yeah, no, I know. Well, you study U2, and then you can move that into
Also,
contemporary Christian.
there's a misconception about the fact that it takes time to get good. Today we live in this mix, instant mix. I should be good after learning 3 or 4 chords. No, you can't be good.
Right, right.
In fact, I like the 10,000 hour rule.
Yeah.
It takes you time to get good at it.
Right.
And during those 10,000 hours, you're making contacts, you're getting better.
Sure.
And the stuff that you did in 5,000 hours, you look back and go, that was horrible.
Right.
But at 10,000 hours, maybe you're a lot better. So,
Sure.
I mean, it's just, don't be in such a hurry.
Right, exactly.
Don't be in
it's
such
just
a
that
hurry.
immediate society and
I mean, it's
everybody's
just
so
don't
many
be-
distractions.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. So let's move on to the Christopher Cross thing and how that came about. And you won. You guys were nominated for 10 Grammys, is that right? And you won 3 of them.
Yeah, one album of the year.
And album of the year in 1980.
Song of the year.
And the thing,
Artist of the year for him.
Was it Ride Like the Wind or Sailing for Song of the Year?
Both. Oh, it was Sailing was.
Sailing was
yeah,
the.
yeah.
Now, the interesting thing about that record, when I look at the credits, is I see some of those Austin guys. So I guess the question, like Tommy on drums and things like that. How
Andy
did those
playing bass.
guys get in with, like, was ABC allowing that, like people that weren't LA session guys?
Well, that was Warner Brothers.
that was
That
Warner
was
Brothers.
during the
Okay.
Warner Brothers days, yeah. And no, in fact, I was a real supporter of bands.
Right.
In fact, my favorite music is bands. It's not individual artists. I've done a lot of individual artists, but frankly, bands are what float my boat. But I was a staff producer at Warner's, and I was at a Wednesday morning meeting, which was when we did our little A&R thing. And Lenny Warnaker, who was the head of A&R, said, we got another cassette from Christopher Cross. And I said, wow, this is the first time I've ever heard this guy's name.
And he was a fusion guy. I mean, he had done some interesting stuff in Austin.
Yeah, but the thing is that he kept sending cassettes for at least 2 years before I got there. So these guys had been hearing kind of, and the other guys, oh, not another one.
So that's a good thing for persistence, right? A good,
Persistence.
Yeah, just.
And there was no denying that he was talented.
Right.
But after so many years, a
they
couple of
just get
years
worn
of
out.
just hearing it, you get worn out. But I wasn't. This is the first time I heard it. And Sailing happened to be on that tape. And I'm sitting there and I'm listening to 3 or 4 songs and I'm looking around. I'm going, am I the only one that thinks this is pretty cool? And I'll remember Teddy Templeman saying, if you like it, Omar, you do it.
Wow.
That's all they said. And it did. That's exactly the atmosphere was like that.
That's
if you
amazing.
like it, you do it. And so Chris comes out thinking Lenny Warnaker or Ted Templeman were going to be his producer. He did not. He had no idea that he was going to end up in my office. Who are you? Kind of guy. Omartian. This doesn't mean. Anyway, so he shows up. He comes in. We sit down, and I'm telling him how much I like it, and there's no response. It's like I'm going, wow, this is the weirdest meeting I've ever had. So he leaves and goes to lunch, and evidently he ate lunch with Warnaker, and Warnaker said, you do realize that Omar played on the Steely Dan records.
Right.
He said, you're kidding me. He said, no. He says, oh, he came back in after lunch. You're my producer. That was it. That was it.
Yeah.
That was just that was it. It started.
There you go. Open the
but
door,
to go back to the band, I like the idea of taking taking people who are playing at their limit.
Right.
but they bring something to the table. They don't play all kinds of styles. They're not able to shift gears, but they have a thing. And we worked hard. It took a long time to get those tracks, and it was hard. But my biggest regret was the second album when he decided that he didn't want to do that with those guys anymore. He wanted to go to session musicians. I went, oh man, this is a mistake. I don't think this is going to end well. And you compare to 17 million sales to 3.5 or 4, it's still a success.
Yeah, oh yeah, either way.
But I feel like whatever it was that was magical about the first album, which had to do with the engineer, it had to do with the musicians, it had to do with the songs. You know, a lot of times the artist's first record, if they're a songwriter, is always their best because they've been writing songs for 10 years.
Yeah.
And now it's time to rush and get while you're out on the road and doing whatever. So it's a different dynamic. And so I understand why he wanted to do it with session players, because he realized it wouldn't take as long to realize what the potential of these songs were.
Right.
But I still said, man, there was a magic in that thing.
Yeah.
And it was
like every song on that record.
It was pretty cool.
And so were you vetting songs too? And then I guess that comes to the question of any project you're working on, what makes a quote unquote good song? But because every song was strung, were you picking from a pool of 30 or whatever and saying this is that? And
a lot of songs. And it happens kind of organically. I mean, the bottom line is I'd love to be able to say that there's always some overarching goal, but there never is. It's just organic. Oh, when did you write that? I wrote it a couple days ago. Well, let's take that one out because that's a whole lot better than this. But you wouldn't have known that 2 days earlier because it didn't exist.
Yeah.
And so, and it's funny because I remember one of the lawyers at Warner's came down to my office when that record was done, and he just gave it to me. He said, how could you spend that much money on this kid's first album? I go, we spent a lot of time. And he said, don't you ever, he was really on me. He said, don't you ever do that again. He said, this will never recoup. And he was just giving it to me. He was so mad. And I'll never forget, it sold 17 million. He comes back into my office and says, Omar, spend whatever you want on the second album. That's fine.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Spend whatever you want.
And this just a little funny. Have you seen that? And this is going way back, but the SCTV thing where the Michael McDonald jumps in and sings "Right Like the Wind." That's funny.
That was a funny bit.
That was a funny bit, but from back in the day. So have you seen that the SCTV Michael McDonald thing where he's jumping in on "Ride Like the Wind"?
Yeah, it was on Saturday Night Live, I think it was. Yeah, it was pretty funny.
It was pretty funny. Go check that on YouTube if you haven't seen it. So anyway, that album obviously had a big impact on your career.
Yeah.
3 Grammys, Producer of the Year, won 3 Grammys, 10 nominated. Where do you go from there? I mean, are you getting any production project you want after that, or?
It kind of goes with the territory.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to tell you how I had, to me, my whole career has been a miracle. I don't know. I don't sit around going, oh, I deserve this. I don't feel that way at all. I just feel like it was kind of interesting. It's very organic.
Yeah.
Having the security of a label like a Warner Brothers around you, because that was a Warner Brothers project, and to see the excitement, not just for me, but the president's going nuts. Mo Austin's just going, he's so excited for us, for our success, and having that kind of thing. Yeah, it opened up a lot of doors. The Rod Stewart.
I want to
Camouflage record
talk
came
about
out of
that because
Donna Summer came out of that, and all kinds of stuff came out of that particular
so
project.
some specific songs that of course I grew up with all these songs. You were producer, co-writer. You said you didn't write too much, but it's a pretty good co-write. An arranger for Donna Summer's "She Works Hard for the Money." Maybe talk about the creative process on that song.
Well, this was we were cutting this song as MTV was just ramping up.
Okay.
83.
Okay.
And so we were in the studio, and it's not like today. Donna liked to write in the studio, paying a full studio rate. So we'd be in a big studio. I'd be sitting at the piano, or I'd have some synths set up. Be paying $2,000 a day. It was nobody thought anything about it.
Right.
But I just started boom, boom, boom. I just started doing. She said, "What is that?" I said, I don't know. And she started singing, humming, and she said, "Put this down on tape." And I put it down on tape. We didn't have a complete song. And she said she went to a restaurant that night. After we did our writing, I went home. She said, and she went into the bathroom, and it was a really high upscale restaurant. And there was this lady who was the bathroom attendant. Her name was Onetta. And she got to talking to her, and she walked out, and she said the first thing that came to mind, she works hard for money.
Yeah.
For the money. And she said that was it. So we were in the studio the next day. We finished the song. We cut the session. Mike Baird played drums, a bunch of different players. And I remember we were kind of pretty far along. I'd already done the horns, done everything. Les Garland, who was the president of MTV, was in town.
Nice.
And Susan Mineo, her manager, called him and said, come on by the studio, I want you to hear something.
Yeah.
So we sat him down, and we played a rough mix of She Works Hard for the Money. And he said, get that done, get a video done, and I'll put it on MTV right away. And that's exactly what happened.
Wow, it blew
Boom.
up. Yeah.
Doesn't happen that way
Yeah.
anymore.
Great timing.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah, great
so.
time. No, but did that have some programming in it? I'm trying to remember the song.
No,
that's
not,
83. That's on the cusp
believe
of MIDI.
Believe it or not, that whole thing was cut to a click, but no, that whole thing was live.
Oh,
there
wow.
was no programming.
Wow.
Those were JP8, the Jupiter 8.
Yeah.
I used a lot of the Jupiter 8. The Prophet.
Right.
Mike Boddicker, who's a programmer and a keyboard player, he came over and he would work with me on the sounds.
Yeah.
No, none of that was programmed.
Wow.
Not a bit.
So let's fast forward because I still I just love all these things, your discography. 1985, you're the arranger and keyboard player on We Are the World. That's pretty big.
Well,
partial arranger.
Partial arranger.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some.
You're coming up with parts, or at least some parts.
Yeah, I mean
Quincy's there, executive, and
I mean, he called Phil and Gaines play on it. Everybody played on it. I came up with the entire intro. Let's put it that way.
All right. Well,
how
that's
do we
not
start
bad.
this tune? So I went to the synths and I did all this kind of celestial craziness to bring you into the song, and then someone else takes over from that point.
Hey, man, it's still.
So
were you working? Did you get to work with Michael or Lionel or any of those guys, or were they around?
Yeah, those guys
wow.
were all around.
Wow.
Yeah, Michael's was kind of funny. He was going through his little.
This was pre-Thriller. No, that was post-Thriller.
Yeah,
so that was like
so
right
he was kind of elusive and he was a little different.
I
met him and I see him a lot when he had his nose and everything was normal. But around that time, I remember I said, "Hey, is Mike around?" And he says, "Yeah, he's in the lounge. We're at the studio."
Yeah.
So I walk in the lounge. There's nobody, but I noticed the bathroom door was closed. So I thought, well, he's just in the bathroom. I went back and he's still in the bathroom. Finally, yes. I said, "Mike, is that you?" I said, "It's Omar." He said, "Hey, Omar, how you doing?" I said, "Fine." And I turned around and walked out. He was in the bathroom the whole day because he just didn't want to have anybody around him. So he was getting a little bit paranoid.
Well, I could see that after an album like Thriller.
He was
it's
getting
like
a little paranoid.
Okay, so those are a couple, and then it just keeps going on. I was going to say, I'm just going to name some singles because these are the ones that popped to me when they were on the radio for just months at a time when I was growing up. Michael Bolton's How Am I Supposed to Live Without You? You produced that whole record, right?
No, I produced four sides.
Four sides on that one. Amy Grant, Heart in Motion, you produced that whole thing. Or
No.
that whole
I produced That's
partial.
What Love Is For, and then the duet was Cetera, which was
Next Time I Fall.
Yeah. But that was off of his record.
Those are huge. I mean, like when I was growing up, Glory of Love, Karate Kid, which was nominated for an Oscar. Mm-hmm. And so with Peter's thing, coming off working with Foster, I guess, was he working with David Foster?
On the Chicago record.
Yeah, before he comes off. And I mean, just all those arrangements. So you're both arranging and coming up with or producing all the musicians and all that, and then Rod Stewart's Camouflage, which Infatuation. Some guys have All the Luck. Yeah. Just keeps going on. So you're just having this huge streak in the '80s, and so why leave LA? I mean, at that point, is there something in between there?
No.
Did you have 3 children, right? 2 children? 3. 2 children. Were you having children? Were you married?
Well, they were when we moved here, my son was a senior.
Okay.
In high school. And he ended up going to Belmont and graduating from Belmont.
Yeah.
And my daughter was in junior high school. But what was happening was we were flying, because things were getting decentralized.
Right.
I mean, LA, you didn't have to be in LA. We could fly to Nashville, work with Amy Grant and a bunch of different people. And so Terry, my engineer, and I were flying maybe 3 times a year. Around 1989, 1990, we were flying back and forth to do projects. So we'd stay here for a week to 2 weeks at a time.
Right.
Well, my wife Stormy had never come out here. So I was getting the lay of the land. I was enjoying the beautiful rolling hills, the animals. You'd be 10 minutes
you're from Chicago
from
originally
Chicago
anyway.
And
so
LA, and so you're not going to find any cows or sheep in a field next to, So it was really kind of a stunning thing. And both Terry and I said, this is really cool. We're having a good time.
Yeah.
So it was a real hard sell to go back and convince our wives. But there was something else going on too. And what was happening was, everything was getting computer based.
Right.
So, even though we'd cut a record, you'd have Jeff Beccaro playing cymbals, but programming drums.
Yeah.
You'd have Mike Baird programming drums. These are great drummers.
Yeah.
Why are they in the studio programming?
Yeah.
They should be playing. It was a disturbing time, and you didn't use real bass, so I played MIDI bass. It was just getting weird. And then you'd bring in a guitar player to just do some stuff. Nothing was really guitar based in the 80s. 80s was very synth based.
Right.
And so it was a combination of coming here and realizing that in a good way, Nashville was 10 to 15 years behind that trend. I mean, it really was. You would go and you'd play live rhythm sections.
Yep.
And nobody would even dispute, oh, we need to bring a computer in and do some MIDI stuff. It wasn't that way.
Yeah.
And I had too much of that as part of my history to want to maintain that or feel that buzz you get from playing with musicians.
Sure.
So it was a tough thing, but both Terry and his wife and my family moved out in June of '93 and started here.
And that was a good time to move out, because was that right before the Garth, or was that right in the middle of Garth
let me
explosion?
Tell you, we'd sit in L.A., Terry and I, and we look at the pop charts. Who is Garth Brooks and why does he have the #1 record? We didn't know. We had no clue.
Yeah.
Reba McEntire selling 5.
Sure.
Vince Gill's son. I mean, all these people are selling mega millions. Shania Twain, I played on some of her stuff. I mean, millions. And it wasn't happening out there like that.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
So we kind of went with where it was. Now Nashville is becoming more like L.A. was. I guess it's just a natural evolution, the way things work.
So you get to town, and you didn't have a bad record here either. You started writing. You had a nice cut. Was it nominated with the one with Vince? Was it?
When Love Finds You.
Yeah, and that
Song of the Year.
Song of the Year.
Nominated in the Grammys.
And then a lot of Dove nominations too. So were you working at that point mainly in CCM, mainly in country, or all of the above?
Well, I'll tell you what I did.
Yeah.
And I don't know what this might be something to pass on. When I came here, I had a real nice history, but I came in going, I don't know anything.
Right.
I called Tony Brown, I called Mark Wright, and I sat in their office. I said, look, I'm not here to take anything over. I said, I just want to learn.
Yeah.
I just want to be part of this. I said, I'm not here to say it's going to be my town. I said, I don't feel that way. But I've known people who've come here and tried that, and it didn't end well.
Yeah.
And I really felt like, just be humble. You don't have to sit around and go, I did this, I did that. It was never in my thing. And immediately, Tony had me co-producing Reba McEntire. Mark Wright had me co-producing, and I was just as happy as a clam. And it was really cool that they said, let's work together.
That's a welcoming.
And it was awesome.
Yeah.
It was awesome, and we had a great time. And I'm so thankful to guys like Tony and to Mark and these kind of people who said, here's a guy who's really done pretty well. Is he going to be a jerk or whatever? And I just said, that's not me.
Yeah.
I don't feel that way. I don't look at my career as look at what I've done. I don't view it that way. I just said I'm blessed.
Yeah.
I can't believe this has all happened. It's like a blur. It really is.
Yeah, that's so.
And my family
beautiful.
was more important than anything.
Yeah.
My relationship with the Lord is more important than anything. And just as a result of that, I went, God takes care of things.
Sure.
Just be humble and use your talent and go where you're supposed to go.
Right.
Very simple.
Well, let's actually now. I think I'm ready. But in the meantime, you also put out 6 solo albums, right?
Those are.
You can check that out.
That's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. Well, let me go into those solo albums real quick. Now you're producing yourself. Now you're having to write, track, mix. Can you see the forest for the trees? As far as, do you get lost in something when it's your own project? Is it different?
Well, I think that you have to realize where is the end to this?
Right.
And the end is not to become #1 on the charts when you're doing this. It's more to dinner music.
Right.
Whatever you want to call it. You have to look at it and go,
what's the purpose?
What's the
of it?
upside?
Yeah.
So you're not going to sweat bullets.
Right.
And in the case of the 3 or 4 things I did for Green Hill, the concept was given to me. We want you to do an album based on movie themes, or Christmas songs, or gospel music, and so it was already set. It was already cast. It's not me trying to write a single.
Sure.
So it was a different thing.
Okay, so let's take it to today. We know you're working out of the studio here in Nashville, and are you involved with some movie score stuff? You were saying, and some country artists.
Not huge movie scores. Or more. 2 of them are documentaries, and one actually interestingly enough, my very first score was a thing called Every Boy Needs a Hero. It's a baseball movie, and it was really cool.
And you're a huge baseball fan, like
I'm
you said.
I'm a big baseball fan. And so it won the music score of the year of the Pan Pacific thing, which is L.A. all the way to Korea.
Yeah.
So it's not a big deal, but it was just kind of affirming to me.
Yeah.
Like, okay. There were a lot of films that were submitted. So, and then there's 2 country artists that I'm working with right now. One's named Cherish Lee, another one's Sierra Black, and they're very, very talented. But there's a big clog in country music. It's real tough.
Yeah,
it's
I mean, we were just talking about that. How do you stand out? You know, I mean, it seems like that. It's like what I tell people, and you tell me if you agree, that when an artist comes here with a unique voice, Nashville somehow vanillaizes them or homogenizes them because of radio. I mean, we know that's because it's got to fit in radio. So how do you make them unique enough but still fit radio, I guess is my question.
Let me put it this way. I'm glad I'm 70 years old. It really is a different dynamic.
Yeah.
When you're 70 years old, nothing really means as much as when you're 30.
Right.
And so I look at it like I'm going to give you everything I got, but I'm not going to fall apart if things aren't working the way everybody expects them to work. Right. Because in fact, I find that if it's not going to work, it's probably not because of something you've done if you've worked hard. It's something that's outside of that.
Sure.
And right now we're in an outside environment of too many people trying to get to the same slice of the pie.
Yeah.
And you need a break.
Right.
And the bottom line is it doesn't matter what you do. When I was with Warner Brothers, a very small percentage of the artists they had were actually successful. So you take that principle and you go, okay, I'm working with 2 or 3 artists. I'd be lucky to have one even.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how good they are.
Yeah.
You'd be fortunate just to have one to get a little bit of noise going.
Exactly.
The odds are so stacked. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, like a Big Machine is a huge label. It doesn't matter how big of a label it is. Everybody lives in the same environment.
Yeah.
In other words, you're trying to sign someone who's unique.
Yeah.
But you find out that there's 10 or 15 are trying to be that same unique.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is right now, trying to break a female artist in country is a very, very hard thing, and it's really not fair.
Yeah.
It's not fair.
I know.
So,
well, but we were just talking earlier about wearing a lot of hats, and your film scoring shows that. I mean, you don't need the projects to survive. Obviously, it's a labor of love for you, but you're wearing a lot of different hats. And we were talking about giving folks advice. Like you said, your son is really wearing a lot of hats in the industry today. He's a multi-instrumentalist. He's a writer. He's an artist. He's a player. And so would that be the advice, I guess, you would give?
Well, if you're a phenomenal instrumentalist and that's what you want to do, stick with that.
Right.
But if you're going to be a producer, and with no budgets, basically there are no A&R departments left in record label. They want you to deliver something that they can go, well, we either like this or we don't like this, and if we like it, we just want to put it out.
Right. So
which
just
means that you're bearing the expense. Yeah. You're bearing the creative expense and the financial expense to make this work.
Yeah.
So you're asking for a parent to throw so much money at something.
Yeah.
So guys like my son, his age, and probably a lot of the Belmont students, you need to learn how to do a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe probably learn some instruments. Like in my son's case, he plays all 4 of the rhythm instruments. He can engineer, and he's really good at it. But he made himself good at it because he knows that the dynamic today is a record company's not going to come and say, we're going to give you $250,000 to produce a record. Right. No, you're going to do it on your own time, in your spare time or whatever. Maybe mom and dad can throw a few thousand in there, but you're working for way below market value. I mean, and it's a tough time. And I'm not sure that it's going to change.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's going to change.
Yeah, diversify. Yeah. Okay, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. And then we're finally, after this next segment, we're going to move into your control room and take a listen to a track. So we'll see you guys in just a second.
I have a gift of playing music. That's what I got. I was pretty much afraid of everything. Afraid of the world, afraid of speaking. Music was the voice I didn't have.
Welcome back. We're here in the producer's room again, and so happy to be in Michael Omar's studio.
Yeah,
Omar.
Yes,
that's your nickname, huh?
Yeah, Omar the tent maker. That's what I heard all my life. Yeah.
I like that. Let's get a little bit of technical stuff. We don't do too much technical stuff on the show, but we were just talking about, the early days of MIDI and programming synthesizers. Are there any soft synths that you like nowadays? Are you still using hardware or
No.
both? And
You use a little bit of both, but
Okay.
I'm really relying way more on stuff like Omnisphere.
Yeah, yeah.
LA scoring
strings.
Cinebrass, and there's so many wonderful programs. I just got this called Cinestrings Runs. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. You can get all types of scales of runs in violin.
Right.
And it doesn't matter where you put it in the bar. If you start the run on 2-and, it will end on the downbeat of the following bar. It's pretty amazing.
Figures that out.
And it takes all the, the strings tend to be a little bit delayed.
Yeah.
It's all been compensated for, so you just push a note, decide what scale you want, what key you want, and plug it in. It's pretty amazing.
Man.
Yeah, it's amazing, the programs.
Gosh. And so when we were talking about you doing your scores, you're doing kind of a combination or a hybrid like most composers are today, where you're programming some stuff using live on the other. It's just because budgets, like we were talking about, are lower.
Well, I did a thing called The Black Robe Regiment, which is a movie. It's about the movie of the pastors and clergy that fought with George Washington in the American Revolution. And so I used, there's a guy named Bill Miller who plays Native American flutes.
Oh, wow.
So I brought him in and I just said, give me all kinds of moods. I don't care what the key is. And I made them fit into the thing with like a pedal note or some simple chords or something. It gave this really haunting kind of sound to it, and I used that in the thing. I also used some traditional drum and fife from the time, and then I used orchestral programs. The budget wasn't big enough for me to be able to get an orchestra in the room, but the combination of a few live instruments. I did some upright piano stuff, and it turned out pretty cool. But yeah, you have to kind of, I mean, to tell you the truth, my first score I did for nothing.
Yeah. I mean,
Because
you have to get in the game.
And it took me 3 months, and you do it for nothing.
So let's talk. I mean, you were saying that, and we're going to meet your engineer Terry here in a minute, and that's going to be awesome. But any other hardware, software tools that you could say, well, I couldn't live without since?
Ivory piano is a real important thing.
Okay.
Synthesizers, no. I mean, I think that what happens is that you can find new stuff all the time. I'm not much of I don't do club stuff.
Right.
So I'm not really immersed in that Euro synth thing. Though I've been using on Omnisphere a lot of JP8 patches.
Nice. Well, you use the real stuff, so I'm just like.
But the JP8 patches on Omnisphere are pretty impressive. In fact, I did one of the tracks for Sierra Black, which sounds like an '80s cut.
Yeah.
Right out of the '80s.
Wow, man.
Yeah. So.
Well, I want to take a step back real quick and talk about arranging in general, just when you're either arranging orchestral or pop. Any tips you can give there? I know that's such a hard thing to learn, but as far as, I mean, when I listen to your productions, that's one thing that sticks out. Everything has a place in the production. So is it just a matter of listening for holes and figuring out what fits in those holes? Or?
Well, when I first started writing for strings, I thought everything was going to be heard. And you learn very quickly that just in the spectrum of sound, certain things cancel other things out. So why are you making the cello so complicated when they're fighting with the bass?
Sure.
And they're fighting with the low end of the piano. And you realize that what's going to really count is when the chorus hits is a string line that is above the vocal.
Sure.
Or whatever. Or a horn line that doesn't just step all over everything that's going on. I think that's probably the thing you learn the quickest, is that doesn't work because it's fighting what you're supposed to be listening to. In the case of a song where our singers, you got to hear the singer.
Right.
It's not about your arrangement. And so a lot of times I do kind of simplistic stuff, which you go, well, that's not real adventurous. Yeah, but if I were adventurous, it would conflict with what's going on. And so I don't look at it like in the early days, and it goes with everything. Like when a kid, play me something.
Right.
No, you don't have to do that. I know you can play. You don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Just play something.
Sure.
It's this whole thing that we're going to let you know that I know all the notes and I can spit them out as fast as I can, or I can write with all this complication stuff. Okay, we know you can do it, but Steve Barry was the guy that was with ABC. He taught me what it is to understand what's going on in the sound, what really counts and what doesn't count. And all you're doing is making it harder for the engineer to try to mix because there's such a mess going on.
That's what I was going to say. Terry can probably testify that if you get a great arrangement, you don't have to do much work. No. It's not much EQ or anything.
And I mean, he uses the word this mixes itself, which it never does. But the bottom line is, and some songs just are not great songs, and so they're hard to come up with lines that make sense because the chord structure is such where it's doesn't make for good counterpoint.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, so we have a section, and it's called Rapid Fire, and it doesn't have to be rapid, but I'm going to ask you some deeper questions, some funny questions, some questions you may have to think about for a minute. And so let's go to Rapid Fire with Michael. All right, so let's start with an easier one.
Blue.
3 to 5 desert island albums. Like if you were stuck on an island and you had to listen to music. Now, I don't know if you still actually, some guys are like, I've listened to enough music and I only do it as a profession, but any records that
Abbey Road would be one of them.
Yeah.
Weather Report, Heavy Weather would be another one.
Yeah.
And an Oscar Peterson record.
Yeah, that's good choices. All right.
Night Train.
All right. Favorite song or two in general? Just an actual song like you think.
I love Philadelphia Freedom.
Yeah.
I love Philadelphia, and I like the last 6 or 7 sides of the Abbey Road.
Okay, cool.
As it goes to the end.
Cool. I mean, because that is orchestral a little bit in its nature because they're combining all those.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we'll get a little bit deeper now, and we've kind of discussed this, but I like I said, part of this show is to really preserve legacies. So the question I have written down, I know this is a deep one, but what do you want your legacy to be? How do you want people to remember you?
To be very honest with you, I want people to remember me as a guy who's a good guy, period.
Cool.
I don't care about the musician side. It's just a fair, respectful person. That's what I want people to remember. The music thing doesn't mean anything to me. I mean that. It means more that people go, he's a good dude.
Wow.
That's all I care about.
Man, that's great. Okay, something said to you by one of your mentors, by your wife, whoever, that improved your life for the better.
My brother-in-law basically said, Michael, he said, sometimes you have to do things for nothing just to get your foot in the door. And he made it, he says, you know what, he says, you don't want to do it. He said, but you have to do it. I said, yeah. That meant a lot to me.
Good advice for our audience there as well. Okay. Two-part question. What are you best at and what are you afraid of?
I think I'm really best at organizing in a room with people, whether it's musicians or whatever. I can make things kind of go from a little bit chaotic to organized.
Good.
And I think that's probably part of the strength of being a producer, where you have to oversee the whole thing, not get caught too much in a detail, but see how everything works together. And the other thing was what I'm afraid of.
What are you afraid of, or what are you worst at? Well, you go either way. could be the same thing, or different.
If someone were to say, with a little bit of arthritis in my hands, play me something like just give me a real progressive jazz thing. I would be afraid of that right now because I don't have the dexterity.
Yeah, show us some Oscar Peterson licks. Okay.
Well, I could do some of that, but I mean, it would be tough. Yeah.
All right, we'll do a couple more, and then we'll do it. Any song of yours that you either produced or wrote that you were surprised when it became a hit? Like you were like, I don't know about this, but then it whatever marketing or MTV or.
No, I got to tell you, it would be the reverse. A couple that I was surprised that weren't hits. But and I got to tell you, I don't even know because it's hard to say. Well, I think Ride Like the Wind. I was really shocked because we were told that we were completely out of time. You are in the wrong time. What you're doing is wrong. What you're coming out with has nothing to do with what's going on. It's all punk music. It's Debby, Harry. It's the Cars. What are you coming out with this thing that sounds like a spaghetti Western theme? And I remember that. Yeah.
That was that attorney that you were talking about giving you all the
he was like, he's giving it to me. Yeah. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, that did actually. Okay. One more, perhaps. Your most memorable professional moment. professional moment. Was it winning a Grammy or was it?
I would say that there are 3 or 4 things that happen if you're realistic about your career that you go, wow, I wasn't expecting this. And I got to say, it was the sweep of that Grammys that probably surprised me more than anything because Barbra Streisand, who I knew, is yelling from behind the curtain as I'm passing her to go to pick up a thing. Michael Omartian, that stinks. What you did was terrible. You know that. It's horrible. And I'm looking back and I'm laughing at her. She was just cussing us out the whole evening. She was backstage. Boy, I did stuff better than you. She was just like that. And then I get a call to do her next record from her. Yeah,
wow.
that was
a good feeling.
That was kind of a thing. And you know, you can put all that. You can put that in just like I said.
All right, good. Okay, guys, we're in the tracking room right now. We're going to head into the control room, and Michael's going to dissect one of his productions for us. See you in just a second.